What if I told you that everything you've believed about wealth, about money, about the time it takes to transform your financial reality has been a carefully constructed limitation that's kept you exactly where you are? Have you ever wondered why some people seem to attract abundance effortlessly while you've been working twice as hard for half the results? The answer might shock you, but more importantly, it might set you free. You're here right now, watching this video, and I need you to understand something crucial. This is not a coincidence. There are no accidents in the universe. The fact that you're hearing these words at this precise moment means something has already begun to shift in the invisible realms that govern your reality. While you've been searching for answers, heaven has been orchestrating a divine appointment between you and your breakthrough. Has this ever happened to you? You stumble across something at exactly the right time, and later you realize it was the turning point that changed everything. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Joseph Murphy understood something that most people never grasp in an entire lifetime. He discovered that the universe operates on laws as precise as gravity, as predictable as mathematics, and as powerful as nuclear energy. These laws don't care about your past, your failures, or how long you've been struggling. They only respond to one thing: the frequency you're broadcasting right now, in this very moment. And here's what's extraordinary. You're about to learn how to tune that frequency to the exact wavelength of millionaire consciousness. For years, perhaps decades, you've been told that wealth takes time, that you need to climb slowly, pay your dues, wait your turn. But what if that entire narrative was designed to keep you small? What if time itself is not the rigid, linear constraint you've been led to believe it is? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely shatter everything you thought you knew about manifestation, abundance, and the true nature of reality. The next 30 days are not going to look like the last 30 years of your life. Something is breaking. Right now, as you read these words, can you feel it? There's a compression happening in the fabric of your personal timeline. Delays that have held you hostage are beginning to collapse. Years of waiting are being redeemed in moments. This isn't mystical thinking. This is universal law in action. When you align yourself with these principles, when you step into the stream of divine order, acceleration becomes your new normal. What you're experiencing right now, this restlessness, this hunger for more, this knowing that you're destined for greater things, that's not frustration. That's your spirit recognizing truth. Your subconscious mind is already beginning to reorganize itself around a new possibility. And in the quantum field, where all potential outcomes exist simultaneously, your millionaire reality has already crystallized. But here's where it gets even more profound. There's a grace available to you right now that most people never tap into because they don't even know it exists. Joseph Murphy called it the supernatural element of manifestation. That mysterious force that accelerates outcomes beyond what logic and effort alone could ever produce. Think about it. Have you ever witnessed someone receive an opportunity that seemed to come out of nowhere? A connection that changed everything. A sudden influx of resources that defied all rational explanation. That wasn't luck. That was grace in motion. And right now, as you absorb these words, that same grace is hovering over your life like an invisible field of pure potential. The atmosphere around you is literally charged with possibilities that are waiting to take form. Modern quantum physics has proven what ancient wisdom always knew, that the space around you isn't empty. It's teeming with energy, vibrating at frequencies that correspond to every possible outcome. Your financial transformation isn't something you need to create from scratch. It already exists in the quantum field. Your only job is to tune yourself to its frequency. When you do this, you stop pushing and start attracting. You stop chasing and start magnetizing. The entire universe begins to rearrange itself to match the signal you're broadcasting. This is your open heaven moment. While others are operating under closed systems, limited by what they can see and touch, you're being positioned under an open channel where resources flow freely, where divine timing replaces human struggle, where the right people appear at exactly the right moment. Have you noticed how some individuals seem to have doors open for them effortlessly while others knock for years? The difference isn't talent, education, or even hard work. The difference is frequency. The difference is alignment. The difference is understanding that you're not operating in a random universe. You're operating in an intelligent, responsive system that mirrors back exactly what you project into it. If this resonated with you, go ahead and subscribe. There's so much more we're going to explore together, deeper insights and practical strategies for activating real wealth consciousness. Angels, in Murphy's teaching, aren't just ethereal beings. They represent the invisible forces and synchronicities that work on your behalf when you're in harmony with universal law. Resources aren't scarce. They're being redirected toward those who understand how to receive them. Opportunities aren't random. They're magnetized to the consciousness that's ready for them. And this isn't the hour for hesitation or second-guessing. This is the hour for bold alignment, for stepping fully into the truth of who you're becoming. Now, I want to go even deeper into this transformation, because understanding the mechanics of this shift is what separates those who experience temporary bursts of success from those who establish permanent wealth consciousness. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for my open heaven." You've probably felt it before, that invisible resistance. You make a decision to move forward, and suddenly everything seems harder than it should be. Doors that should open stay closed. People who should help become obstacles. Systems that should support you seem designed to keep you out. But here's the hidden truth that changes everything. Resistance isn't permanent, it's conditional, and the condition is your internal state. When you shift internally, external systems have no choice but to reconfigure themselves around your new frequency. Joseph Murphy discovered something revolutionary about the nature of reality. He realized that what we call obstacles aren't actually solid barriers. They're energetic patterns responding to our dominant vibration. The moment you genuinely shift your consciousness, those patterns begin to dissolve. It's not that you have to fight harder or push through with more force. It's that the resistance itself loses its power to exist in the presence of your elevated state. Think about a gatekeeper who's been blocking your access to opportunities, resources, or connections. That gatekeeper isn't a villain in your story. They're a mirror reflecting back your own internal blocks. The instant you remove the internal limitation, the external gatekeeper either steps aside or transforms into an ally. This is where most people get it wrong. They're waiting for circumstances to change so they can feel different. But the universe doesn't work that way. You must feel different first, and then circumstances rearrange themselves to match. Every system you've encountered that seemed designed to keep you small was actually just showing you where your consciousness was vibrating. Banks, employers, investors, clients, they're all responding to the signal you're broadcasting. Change the signal and watch how quickly those same systems begin cooperating with your success instead of resisting it. And here's what's happening right now in this very moment. Prosperity isn't on some distant horizon waiting for you to finally deserve it. It's moving toward you with velocity. Divine ideas aren't something you have to strain to receive. They're flooding into your awareness the moment you create space for them. Profitable relationships aren't connections you need to chase down through endless networking. They're being drawn to you magnetically because you've become a match for them. This isn't positive thinking. This is the mechanics of manifestation operating at full capacity. The old paradigm told you to work hard, and maybe, someday, if you're lucky, you'll get ahead. But that's the slow path, the path of struggle, the path that keeps you exhausted and barely surviving. There's another way, and it's available right now. It's the path of alignment, where your inner world and outer world move in perfect synchronization, where opportunities don't require effort because they're being orchestrated by forces far greater than your individual will. What's emerging in your life isn't a slow accumulation, it's a rapid convergence of everything that's been waiting for you to be ready. And something tells me you're more ready than you've ever been. Drop a comment below and write, "I'm aligned with swift prosperity." There's something happening in the invisible realm that most people completely miss because they're so focused on what they can see. Time, as you've experienced it up until now, isn't a fixed law. It's a flexible construct that bends to consciousness. Joseph Murphy understood that when you operate from elevated states of awareness, you literally step outside linear time constraints. What this means practically is that the 3-year plan you've been holding on to, it can collapse into 3 weeks. The gradual climb you thought was necessary, it can become an instant leap. This isn't fantasy. This is how reality actually works, when you stop forcing and start flowing. Think about the moments in your life when everything suddenly clicked into place. A solution appeared out of nowhere. A connection happened at exactly the right second. An idea dropped into your mind that changed your entire trajectory. Those weren't random events. Those were glimpses of what becomes your constant experience when you live in accelerated manifestation. The difference between someone who struggles for decades and someone who transforms in months isn't effort. It's operating system. One person is running old programming that says everything takes time, while the other has upgraded to software that understands the universe responds to frequency, not duration. And here's where it gets remarkable. There's a multiplier effect that activates when you're in true alignment. Every action you take carries exponential impact. Every seed you plant doesn't just grow. It multiplies beyond what you invested. You've probably seen this in reverse. You work hard, put in energy, and get minimal return. That's the sign of misalignment, of swimming against the current. But when you're moving with universal flow, the opposite happens. Small inputs generate massive outputs. A single conversation opens 10 doors. One idea generates multiple income streams. A decision made in clarity creates a cascade of perfect circumstances. If something shifted for you during this video, hit that like button. It helps this message reach others who are ready for this truth. This multiplier anointing, as Murphy would describe it, isn't something reserved for special people. It's available to anyone who understands the mechanics of consciousness and applies them consistently. Your hands aren't just physical tools, they're conduits for creative energy. Your mind isn't just processing thoughts, it's broadcasting frequencies that arrange matter and circumstance. When both are activated in alignment with abundance consciousness, you become unstoppable. Divine deposits start appearing in your life, not because you begged for them, but because you became a vibrational match for them. Financially, you'll notice resources appearing from unexpected sources. Creatively, ideas will flow faster than you can capture them. Mentally, clarity will replace confusion. Spiritually, you will feel connected to a power greater than yourself, guiding every decision. This isn't about working harder, it's about calibrating correctly. And what's been happening while you've been watching this video? Your calibration has already begun shifting. The awareness you're gaining right now is rewiring neural pathways, dissolving old patterns, installing new possibilities. In the comments, write, "I receive multiplied harvests." But none of this works if you're still listening to the wrong voices. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That internal narrative that questions every move you make. The doubt that creeps in right when you're about to take action. The fear that masquerades as wisdom, telling you to play it safe, to wait a little longer, to make sure everything's perfect before you step forward. These voices aren't protecting you. They're programming designed to keep you exactly where you are. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind doesn't discriminate between constructive and destructive input. It simply accepts whatever you feed it most consistently. So if fear and doubt have been your dominant frequencies, your reality has been shaped accordingly. The breakthrough happens when you make a deliberate decision to silence those frequencies and replace them with something stronger. Faith isn't blind optimism or wishful thinking. Faith is the deep knowing that the universe is rigged in your favor, that invisible forces are working on your behalf, that what you're calling forth already exists and is making its way to you. When you tune your heart to this frequency, everything changes. Doors that were invisible suddenly appear. Solutions that seemed impossible become obvious. People who can help you materialize at exactly the right moment. This isn't magic. This is alignment with universal truth operating at full power. And here's what most people don't realize. You can't enter a new level of life while carrying an old identity. Your identity isn't just who you think you are. It's the collection of beliefs, habits, thoughts, and patterns that define your daily experience. If you still see yourself as someone who struggles with money, who has to work twice as hard for half the results, who never quite catches a break, then that's the reality you'll continue to generate. But the moment you step into a new identity, the moment you genuinely see yourself as someone wealth flows to naturally, everything in your external world must reconfigure to match. This identity shift isn't about pretending or faking it. It's about recognizing the truth of who you've always been beneath the conditioning. You were never meant to be limited. You were never designed for scarcity. Every cell in your body, every fiber of your being, every aspect of your consciousness was created for expansion, abundance, and influence. Millionaire status isn't something foreign you're trying to acquire. It's something dormant you're finally activating. Your finances are shifting because your internal reality is shifting. Your mindset is transforming because you're no longer accepting the old stories. Your entire life is reorganizing itself around this new frequency you're broadcasting. What's about to be released into your experience will make everything that came before look like preparation. Leave a comment and say, "My identity is shifting now." Everything you see in your life right now, every circumstance, every relationship, every financial situation began as a thought. Joseph Murphy spent his entire life studying this principle, and what he discovered was both simple and revolutionary. Your thoughts aren't passive observations of reality, they're the actual building blocks creating it. Every thought you think is laying down a blueprint, constructing the architecture of what you'll experience tomorrow, next week, next year. If you've been wondering why certain patterns keep repeating in your life, look at the thoughts you've been thinking on repeat. Those aren't just mental activity, they're construction orders being sent to the universe. The mind is where everything begins. Before a building exists physically, it exists as a blueprint in someone's mind. Before a business generates millions, it exists as an idea in consciousness. Before wealth manifests in your bank account, it must first take root in your mental and emotional landscape. This is the hidden truth that separates those who transform their lives from those who stay stuck. Transformation is always an inside job. You can't change your external world by manipulating external circumstances. You have to change the internal world first, and then watch as the external reality reorganizes itself to match. Here's where most people sabotage themselves without even realizing it. They pray for abundance while thinking thoughts of scarcity. They declare they want wealth while speaking the language of limitation. They set goals for financial freedom while carrying the mindset of someone who believes money is hard to get and harder to keep. It's like trying to drive forward with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake. The universe receives mixed signals and delivers mixed results. You cannot walk into millionaire status while your internal dialogue is still running poverty. Programming, it's not possible. The frequency mismatch creates resistance that blocks the very thing you're asking for. Wealth must be welcomed in your mind before it can arrive in your hands. This means you need to start thinking like someone who already has what you desire. You need to speak like someone who expects success. You need to make decisions from the perspective of your future self, not your current circumstances. When you do this consistently, you're literally rewiring your brain, creating new neural pathways that align with abundance instead of lack. Your subconscious mind begins to accept this new identity as truth, and once it does, it goes to work, orchestrating circumstances, attracting opportunities, and magnetizing resources that match this new internal reality. The journey from where you are to where you want to be isn't primarily about learning new strategies or finding better opportunities. It's about upgrading the operating system of your mind. Everything flows from there. When your thoughts align with wealth consciousness, wealthy outcomes become inevitable. Write in the comments, "I welcome wealth in my mind first." You've probably noticed how certain people seem to effortlessly attract what they want, while others work relentlessly and still come up short. The difference isn't talent, education, or even opportunity. The difference is magnetism. Your mindset functions like a magnetic field, constantly pulling toward you whatever matches its dominant frequency. If your internal narrative says wealth is difficult, scarce, or reserved for others, then your entire environment, the people you meet, the opportunities that appear, the outcomes you generate, will align perfectly with that belief. The universe doesn't argue with you. It simply says yes to whatever you're consistently broadcasting. Joseph Murphy discovered that the subconscious mind is incredibly loyal. It doesn't question what you tell it. It doesn't evaluate whether your thoughts are true or false, helpful or destructive. It simply accepts the narrative you feed it most often and then works tirelessly to make that narrative your lived experience. This is why people who constantly speak about struggle continue to struggle. Not because the universe is punishing them, but because their subconscious is faithfully creating circumstances that match their dominant thoughts. The good news is that this mechanism works both ways. Feed your subconscious a narrative of abundance, possibility, and inevitable success, and it will begin orchestrating your reality to reflect that instead. But here's what requires real courage. You have to be willing to undergo a kind of spiritual surgery. Those limiting beliefs you carry aren't just random thoughts. They're deeply rooted structures that have been built over years, sometimes decades, sometimes inherited from previous generations. They're strongholds constructed from painful experiences, disappointments, things people told you about yourself, and patterns you witnessed growing up. These beliefs feel true because they've been reinforced so many times. But feeling true and being true are two entirely different things. The dismantling process isn't always comfortable. It requires you to question everything you've accepted as fact. It means confronting the voices that told you to stay small, play it safe, not reach too high. It means recognizing that some of the limitations you carry weren't even yours to begin with. They were passed down, absorbed, adopted without your conscious consent. This is the hidden work that nobody talks about. Everyone wants the breakthrough, but few are willing to go through the surgery required to remove the beliefs blocking it. When you begin this process, you're literally tearing down old mental structures and rebuilding new ones that support the life you're designed to live. And once those new structures are in place, everything shifts because the magnet has been reprogrammed. Type in the comments, "I'm ready for the surgery." The transformation you're seeking won't happen through external changes alone. It happens through the renewal of your mind, an ongoing process of replacing old programming with new truth. Joseph Murphy understood that your life can only be as large as your mind allows it to be. If you're operating with a small mindset, you'll generate small results no matter how hard you work. If your beliefs are constricted by fear and limitation, your outcomes will mirror that restriction perfectly. But when you deliberately expand your mind, when you stretch your thinking beyond what feels comfortable, your entire world begins to expand in response. This isn't metaphorical, it's mechanical. Your consciousness creates the container, and your reality fills that container exactly. Think about the areas of your life where you feel stuck. Now trace that stuckness back to a belief you're holding. Maybe it's the belief that making money requires exhausting effort. Maybe it's the belief that people like you don't get those kinds of opportunities. Maybe it's the belief that you've already missed your chance. These beliefs aren't facts. They're filters distorting how you see reality. When you renew your mind, you remove the filters. You start seeing possibilities that were always there but invisible to your old way of thinking. Doors that seemed locked suddenly appear wide open because you're finally perceiving them. And here's the deeper revelation. You weren't designed for survival mode. The struggle, the constant stress about money, the feeling that you're always one step behind, that's not your natural state. That's what happens when you're disconnected from your true identity. You were created with dominion hardwired into your DNA. Dominion doesn't mean domination over others. It means authority over your circumstances, the ability to shape your environment rather than being shaped by it. You were given the power to subdue challenges, to multiply resources, to influence outcomes. This isn't arrogance. This is recognizing the creative force within you. Wealth isn't something separate from your purpose. It's embedded in it. When you operate in your true calling, abundance flows naturally because you're aligned with the reason you exist. The universe doesn't want you barely scraping by. It wants you thriving, expanding, creating impact. But first, you have to accept that this is who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. You're not a victim of circumstance hoping for a lucky break. You're a creator of reality, learning to use your power intentionally. Every limitation you've accepted, every restriction you've believed, every boundary you've respected that was never real, all of it can be dismantled in the renewal of your mind. Leave a comment saying, "I claim my dominion identity." Scarcity was never the original design. When you look at nature, at the universe itself, you see abundance everywhere. Billions of stars, endless oceans, forests that regenerate, ecosystems that multiply. Abundance is the default setting of creation. Joseph Murphy taught that poverty, struggle, and lack are distortions, interruptions of the natural flow that was always meant to move freely through your life. These aren't punishments or tests to prove your worthiness. They're signs that somewhere along the way, the connection to your source got disrupted. But here's the empowering truth. If it can be interrupted, it can be restored. The flow of abundance isn't gone. It's waiting for you to remove the blockages that have been keeping it at bay. So many people have been taught that suffering is noble, that poverty builds character, that struggling proves you're humble. But those teachings were never aligned with divine intention. They were control mechanisms designed to keep people small and compliant. The original blueprint for your life includes prosperity, overflow, and more than enough. Not because you're special or deserving, but because that's the natural state of anyone connected to infinite source. When you disconnect from that flow through limiting beliefs, fear, or accepting narratives of scarcity, you experience lack. But the lack itself is proof that something unnatural is happening, not that this is how things are supposed to be. And this is critical. Your identity has nothing to do with your current bank balance, nothing to do with the mistakes you've made, the opportunities you've missed, or how long you've been struggling. Those are circumstances, not identity. Your true identity is found in what was placed inside you before you encountered a single limitation. You were embedded with creativity, the ability to generate ideas that solve problems and create value. You were given solutions that the world needs. You were designed with strategies that can unlock doors others can't even see. The ability to produce wealth isn't something you acquire through education or connections. It's something you activate by recognizing it was always within you. Most people are looking outside themselves for the source of their wealth, waiting for the right job, the perfect opportunity, someone to give them a chance. But external sources are temporary and unreliable. The real source is internal. When you tap into the creativity, innovation, and strategic thinking already embedded in your consciousness, you become unstoppable. You're no longer dependent on circumstances aligning perfectly. You become someone who creates circumstances, who generates opportunities, who attracts resources because you've activated the wealth-producing capacity you were born with. This shift from external dependency to internal activation changes everything. Comment below and say, "My wealth source is within me." Here's where everything Joseph Murphy taught comes into sharp focus. Becoming wealthy isn't about acquiring something you don't have. It's about recognizing something you've always possessed, but never fully activated. Most people spend their entire lives chasing wealth externally, working harder, searching for better opportunities, hoping the right connection will finally change everything. But external wealth without internal realization is temporary at best. You've seen it happen. Lottery winners who lose everything within years, people who get windfalls only to end up back where they started. Why? Because they received money without first recognizing the wealth within themselves. Without that internal shift, the external gain has nothing to anchor to. True wealth consciousness begins the moment you realize you're not empty waiting to be filled. You're already complete, already equipped, already carrying everything necessary to generate abundance. The ideas that will make you wealthy are already in you. The strategies that will open doors are already present in your consciousness. The creative solutions that solve problems and create value are waiting to be released. When this realization hits you at a core level, money stops being something you chase and becomes something you naturally attract because you've aligned with the frequency of someone who knows their worth. But let's address something that might be holding you back without you even realizing it. You didn't just inherit your family's genetics, you inherited their beliefs about money. If you grew up around scarcity, if you watched your parents stress over bills, if you absorbed messages that money is hard to get and harder to keep, those patterns became embedded in your subconscious. You're carrying programming that isn't even yours. Beliefs that were formed before you could consciously choose them. This is generational poverty consciousness, and it operates silently in the background, sabotaging your efforts without you understanding why. But here's your moment of liberation. You don't have to continue those patterns. You are the cycle breaker, the one chosen to disrupt the limitations that held previous generations captive. When you step into wealth consciousness, you're not just changing your life, you're altering the trajectory of everyone connected to your bloodline. Future generations will look back at you as the pivot point, the one who refused to accept inherited limitations as permanent truth. This isn't just about you getting money. This is about you breaking spiritual chains that have restricted your family for decades, maybe centuries. Every belief you dismantle, every new level you reach, every boundary you cross, creates a new possibility for everyone who comes after you. Drop a comment. I am the cycle breaker. The moment you shift your internal narrative, something extraordinary happens in the spiritual realm. You're not just changing your own trajectory, you're literally rewriting the story for everyone connected to you. Joseph Murphy understood that consciousness doesn't exist in isolation. Your transformation sends ripples backward through your lineage and forward into generations not yet born. Every time you speak abundance instead of lack, every time you envision success instead of failure, every time you expect breakthrough instead of more struggle, you're creating a new energetic blueprint that your entire family line can access. Think about it this way. Your ancestors carried certain limitations not because they were weak or unworthy, but because they didn't have access to the understanding you're gaining right now. They operated within the consciousness available to them. But you have the opportunity to transcend those limitations, and when you do, you create a new ceiling that becomes the new floor for everyone who comes after you. Your children won't have to fight the same battles you fought. Your grandchildren will start from a place of abundance consciousness that you established. This is legacy work happening in real time, and it's happening through the decisions you're making about what you'll believe and what you'll reject. But here's what requires a different level of mental discipline. You have to start thinking from the end, not from the middle. Wealthy thinking isn't based on what you can currently see in your bank account. It's grounded in what you know to be true in the realm of potential. This is what prophetic positioning means. You position yourself mentally and emotionally in the reality you're calling forth, even before physical evidence appears. You don't wait until you have the money to think. Like a millionaire, you think like a millionaire, and the money begins organizing itself to match that frequency. Most people make the mistake of letting their current circumstances dictate their thinking. They look at what they have and think accordingly. But that's reactive consciousness, and it keeps you locked in perpetual repetition of the same results. Prophetic positioning is proactive consciousness. It says, I may not have the overflow yet, but I'm going to think, speak, and act as if I already do, because I understand that my internal state creates my external reality, not the other way around. When you operate this way, you're no longer a victim of circumstances. You become the architect of them. Write in the comments, I think from my future, not my past. Everything in your life right now is responding to the frequency you've been broadcasting. If you want different results, you have to become a different person at the level of thought, speech, and action. Joseph Murphy was emphatic about this. You cannot ascend to a new level while operating with old patterns. Your thoughts have to match the millionaire reality you're stepping into. Your words have to align with someone who expects abundance, not someone hoping it might happen someday. Your decisions, every single one, must be made from the perspective of your future identity, not your current circumstances. This is where most people lose the game before it even starts. They say they want wealth, but their daily language contradicts it. They talk about what they can't afford, what's too expensive, how hard things are. They're constantly reinforcing lack through their words and then wondering why abundance isn't showing up. Your speech is creative. Every word you speak is an instruction to your subconscious and a broadcast to the universe. When you speak like someone destined for wealth, when you talk about money with confidence and ease, when you discuss your future in terms of certainty rather than hope, you're creating the conditions for wealth to flow toward you. Planning is equally critical. You can't plan like someone surviving paycheck to paycheck and expect millionaire outcomes. The way you organize your time, structure your days, and prioritize your energy must reflect the level you're moving toward. Millionaires think in systems and leverage. They plan strategically, not reactively. They make decisions based on long-term impact, not short-term comfort. When you start planning this way, even before the money shows up, you're training your mind to operate at a higher frequency. You're becoming the person wealth recognizes and responds to. And here's what determines whether wealth stays or goes: alignment. Wealth doesn't force its way into chaotic environments. It gravitates toward clarity, purpose, and unshakable confidence. When your life is marked by confusion, unclear goals, scattered focus, conflicting priorities, wealth has nowhere to land. When fear dominates your decisions, when you second-guess yourself constantly, when you're double-minded about what you want, wealth retreats because there's no stable foundation to build on. But the moment you bring clarity to your vision, purpose to your actions, and confidence to your mindset, wealth begins to align itself with you naturally. This alignment isn't something you fake or force. It emerges when you commit to truth at every level, when your internal reality matches your spoken words, when your decisions reflect your stated values, when your daily actions support your declared goals. You create coherence, and coherence is magnetic. Everything you desire begins moving towards you because there's finally a clear signal being sent out. In the comments, write, "I am aligned with wealth." The battle for your financial breakthrough isn't happening in the marketplace, it's happening in your mind. Every single day, thoughts arise that contradict who you're becoming. Thoughts that whisper, "You're not capable enough, not connected enough, not worthy of the wealth you're calling forth." Joseph Murphy taught that these contradictory thoughts are the primary obstacle between you and manifestation. They're not harmless mental chatter, they're active saboteurs working against your success. The moment a thought surfaces that contradicts your divine identity, you have a choice. Accept it as truth or challenge it with greater truth. This is non-negotiable if you're serious about transformation. You cannot allow thoughts of unworthiness to run unchecked in your consciousness. You cannot permit beliefs that say wealth is unattainable to operate in the background of your mind. The instant you recognize a limiting thought, you must confront it, not with aggression but with authority. You replace it with truth. You remind yourself that you were created for abundance, that wealth is your birthright, that financial freedom is not reserved for others, but designed specifically for you. This isn't positive thinking. This is spiritual warfare at the level of consciousness. You're fighting for the territory of your mind, and whoever controls that territory controls your destiny. Training your mind to default to abundance instead of lack is one of the most powerful disciplines you can develop. Most people's minds automatically go to worst-case scenarios, limitations, and reasons why something won't work. That's the default setting they've been programmed with. But you can reprogram it. You can train your mind so that when a challenge appears, your first thought isn't fear, it's possibility. When an opportunity presents itself, your immediate response isn't doubt, it's faith. When you encounter uncertainty, your default isn't panic, it's trust in the process. Your internal dialogue creates the atmosphere of your inner world, and your inner world determines your outer experience. If your internal dialogue is constantly rehearsing problems, replaying failures, and predicting disaster, you're living in a mental environment of poverty consciousness. But when your internal dialogue becomes a sanctuary of prosperity consciousness, when you're consistently speaking to yourself with encouragement, vision, and expectation, you create an internal environment where wealth feels natural, where abundance feels inevitable, where success feels like the only logical outcome. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but it happens with consistent practice. Every time you catch yourself defaulting to fear, you pause and intentionally redirect to faith. Every time you notice yourself thinking small, you consciously expand your vision. Over time, abundance thinking becomes your new default. And when that happens, your external reality has no choice but to mirror it. Type in the comments, "Abundance is my new default." There's a distinct difference in how wealthy people think, and it's not subtle. Joseph Murphy studied this extensively and found that millionaires operate from an entirely different mental framework than the average person. They don't think in terms of limitations, they think in terms of possibilities. They don't ask, can I afford this? They ask, how can I make this happen? They don't see obstacles as stop signs, they see them as puzzles to solve. This isn't arrogance or entitlement, this is elevated thinking, and it's available to anyone willing to upgrade their mental operating system. Your thoughts must rise to meet the level of wealth you're pursuing. Small. Thinking produces small results, period. If you're thinking about saving a few dollars here and there, that's the frequency you're broadcasting. But if you're thinking about creating value at scale, solving problems that affect thousands of people, building systems that generate passive income, now you're thinking at a frequency that attracts real wealth. Your expectations have to expand beyond what feels comfortable or realistic based on your current circumstances. Millionaires expect things to work out in their favor. They expect opportunities to appear. They expect solutions to present themselves, not because they're delusional, but because they've trained their minds to operate from expectation rather than hope. And your language has to be refined. The way you talk about money, about yourself, about your future, every word matters. Wealthy people don't use victim language. They don't say, I can't, or it's impossible, or that's just how life is. They speak with precision, with authority, with the understanding that their words are shaping reality. When you refine your language, you're not just changing how you communicate with others, you're changing how you communicate with yourself and with the universe. But here's the sequence that most people get backwards. They want the external environment to change first, and then they'll adjust internally. They want the money to show up, and then they'll start thinking like a wealthy person. They want the opportunity to appear, and then they'll develop the confidence. That's not how universal law works. The internal shift must happen first. Your inner world has to transform before your outer world can reflect that transformation. Wealth will never flow into a consciousness dominated by fear, scarcity, and limitation. It's energetically impossible. Wealth flows toward minds that are aligned with purpose, operating from clarity and radiating bold expectation. Think of your mind as the soil and wealth as the seed. If the soil is toxic, filled with fear, doubt, and negative programming, the seed can't grow. But when you prepare the soil, when you create an internal environment of abundance consciousness, that same seed flourishes effortlessly. The work isn't in chasing the money. The work is in cultivating the internal conditions that make wealth inevitable. Leave a comment saying, I'm preparing my internal soil. There's a profound shift that happens when you finally step into your divine wealth identity with full conviction. The entire dynamic reverses. Instead of you running after money, strategizing endlessly about how to get it, stressing about where it will come from, money starts moving toward you. Joseph Murphy called this the law of attraction in its purest form, but it's more than attraction, it's magnetic alignment. When you become the person wealth recognizes, it seeks you out. Opportunities you didn't apply for appear, resources you didn't know existed find their way to you. Doors you didn't even know were there suddenly swing open at exactly the right moment. This isn't magic or wishful thinking. This is what happens when you stop operating from a frequency of desperation and start operating from a frequency of certainty. Desperation repels, certainty attracts. When you're chasing money, you're broadcasting need, and need creates distance between you and what you want. But when you embody wealth consciousness, when you genuinely know that abundance is your natural state, you broadcast a different signal entirely. You become someone opportunities want to align with, someone resources flow toward, someone success gravitates to naturally. But let's go deeper into the mechanics of this, because understanding how manifestation actually works changes everything. Wealth doesn't originate in the physical world. It begins in the spiritual realm. in the dimension of pure potential where all possibilities exist simultaneously. Everything you see in the material world, every building, every business, every fortune, existed first as an invisible idea, a thought, an energetic blueprint. Joseph Murphy understood that the unseen realm is primary and the physical world is secondary. The physical is simply a reflection, a manifestation of what already exists spiritually. This means that the wealth you're calling forth isn't something you need to create from nothing. It already exists. The resources you need are already prepared. The opportunities that will catapult you forward are already arranged. The connections that will open impossible doors are already in place. Your job isn't to manufacture these things through sheer effort. Your job is to align yourself with what already exists in the realm of the spirit and pull it into physical manifestation through faith, expectation, and aligned action. Most people are trying to force things into existence through grinding, hustling, and exhausting themselves. But that's working against the natural flow. When you understand that everything begins spiritually, you relax into a different rhythm. You focus on alignment rather than force. You tune into divine timing rather than pushing your own agenda. You become sensitive to the invisible movements happening behind the scenes, and you cooperate with them instead of fighting against them. This is the hidden truth that separates those who struggle endlessly from those who experience breakthrough after breakthrough. Comment below. I align with what already exists. Most people approach wealth from a position of begging, hoping, wishing. They ask the universe for help as if they're powerless supplicants waiting for a merciful deity to throw them scraps. But Joseph Murphy revealed something revolutionary. You're not a beggar in this process, you're an enforcer. When you command wealth gates to open, you're not pleading for resources. You're activating divine laws that were established long before you were born. These are universal principles that govern how abundance flows, and they operate with the same reliability as gravity or mathematics. Your role isn't to convince the universe to make an exception for you. Your role is to step into your authority and enforce what's already been established. This is a radical shift in positioning. You're not hoping wealth will notice you. You're declaring that the pathways designed for your provision must open. You're speaking with the authority of someone who understands how spiritual law works. These aren't empty words or magical incantations. They're the activation codes that trigger principles already in motion. When you decree a thing, when you command with faith and conviction, you're not creating something new. You're releasing something that's been waiting for your voice to set it into motion. And here's where it gets even more powerful. The gates themselves are listening. This isn't metaphorical language. It's spiritual reality. Wealth gates represent the entry points through which abundance flows into your life. Ideas that suddenly drop into your consciousness, relationships that form at precisely the right time, platforms that give you visibility you couldn't manufacture on your own, divine instructions that, when followed, unlock doors you didn't even know existed. These gates aren't passive structures. They're living entry points that respond to prophetic command, to the sound of your voice speaking with authority. Scripture reveals that gates have ears, that they respond when addressed correctly. This means your declarations aren't just making you feel better, they're literally opening pathways in the spiritual realm. When you speak to the gate of divine ideas and command it to release strategies, your mind becomes receptive to downloads from the infinite. When you speak to the gate of divine relationships and command it to connect you with the right people, synchronicities begin happening that logic can't explain. When you speak to the gate of divine platforms and command it to position you, opportunities appear that you didn't pursue. They pursued you. But this only works when you speak from a place of genuine authority, not from doubt disguised as faith. Your voice must carry conviction. Your words must be intentional. You can't speak timidly to these gates and expect them to respond powerfully. They respond to the frequency of certainty, to declarations spoken with full expectation that what you're commanding is already done in the spiritual realm and is now manifesting in the physical. Write in the comments, "I command my gates to open." Acceleration isn't something you manufacture through hustle or grinding harder. It's something that happens when divine propulsion takes over. Joseph Murphy witnessed this phenomenon repeatedly. People who suddenly leapfrogged decades of expected progress in a matter of weeks. Businesses that should have taken years to build reaching profitability in months. Breakthroughs that logically required extensive time happening almost overnight. This isn't luck or coincidence. This is what occurs when supernatural acceleration overrides natural timelines. When divine propulsion kicks in, normal rules stop applying. The delays you've been experiencing, the ones that made you wonder if you'd ever see breakthrough, they get cancelled, not gradually, instantly. What should have required years of slow progress gets compressed into days. Processes that typically unfold over extended periods get rewritten entirely. You move from obscurity to visibility, from struggle to overflow, from limitation to expansion at a pace that defies logical explanation. And everyone watching from the outside tries to make sense of how you got there so fast. But there's no logical path they can trace because you didn't take the normal route. You took the accelerated path. But acceleration doesn't happen in environments where spiritual authority hasn't been established. This is critical. You have to create spiritual dominance in your own life. Your atmosphere must recognize your voice. The forces operating around you, both seen and unseen, must know that when you speak, things shift. Too many people are living as spiritual renters in their own lives, asking permission, hoping circumstances will be kind to them, waiting for external forces to decide their fate. But you weren't designed to rent space in your own destiny. You were designed to own it, to rule it, to exercise authority over it. When you establish spiritual dominance, you're not being aggressive or controlling. You're simply stepping into the role you were always meant to occupy. You're taking your rightful position as someone who decrees outcomes rather than passively accepting whatever shows up. Every time you speak a declaration with genuine faith, you're stamping your authority on spiritual law. You're saying to the invisible realm, "This is what I'm calling forth, and it must respond." The atmosphere around you begins to bend to your voice. Circumstances begin to rearrange themselves. Resistance that once seemed immovable starts to dissolve because it recognizes it's no longer dealing with someone who asks. It's dealing with someone who commands. This level of authority isn't arrogance. It's alignment with how you were designed to function. You have dominion, not through manipulation or force, but through understanding and enforcing spiritual principles that were established before time began. Your voice carries weight in the spiritual realm when it's backed by faith, conviction, and the understanding that you're operating within divine laws, not against them. Comment and say, "My voice carries spiritual authority." Your voice is not just sound vibrating through air. It carries spiritual weight, actual force that moves things in realms you can't see with physical eyes. Joseph Murphy understood something most people miss entirely. When you speak with faith and authority, you're not just expressing yourself. You're creating. Heaven doesn't ignore your words, it responds to them. Angels, those invisible forces working on your behalf, don't stand idle when you decree. They mobilize, and the earth itself, the physical realm you navigate daily, begins to align with what you've spoken. This is why your words matter so profoundly. This is why you can't afford to speak carelessly about your life, your finances, your future. You were given the power to decree for a specific reason, not So you could beg and plead your way through existence, hoping things might work out if you're lucky. You were given this power because the original design was for you to rule, to exercise dominion, to shape your reality through intentional command. Survival was never the plan. Thriving, creating, expanding, influencing, that was always the plan. But somewhere along the way, people forgot their authority and settled into a passive existence, reacting to circumstances instead of creating them. That's not who you are. That's not what you were built for. And here's where obedience becomes the trigger for everything you've been waiting for. Acceleration doesn't flow through convenience or comfort. It flows through obedience to divine instruction. There's always a step that precedes a season. God shows you one move to make, one decision to execute, one instruction to follow, and that single act of obedience becomes the key that unlocks an entire season of breakthrough. Most people miss their acceleration because they're waiting for the perfect conditions, the complete plan, all the details mapped out before they move. But that's not how it works. You get one step at a time, and your willingness to take that step determines whether the door to the next season opens or stays locked. Divine ideas aren't random thoughts floating through your consciousness. They're wealth pathways disguised as inspiration. When an idea drops into your spirit that excites you, challenges you, or feels slightly beyond your current capacity, pay attention. That's not your imagination running wild. That's a divine download showing you the route to your next level. But ideas without action remain dormant. The moment you obey what you've been shown, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if you don't have all the answers, even if it requires you to move before you feel ready, that's when acceleration activates. That's when timelines compress. That's when supernatural momentum takes over and carries you further faster than any amount of planning ever could. Leave a comment. I obey the divine step shown to me. Vagueness kills manifestation. Joseph Murphy was adamant about this. If you want specific results, you must speak with specific language. You can't declare, I want more money, and expect the universe to deliver exactly what you need. More could be $10. More could mean finding change in your couch. The universe responds to precision. When you command wealth gates to open, you have to be clear about which gates, for what purpose, at what level. Your declarations must be intentional, targeted, and completely aligned with the exact outcome you're calling forth. This is where most people lose power in their words. They speak in generalities, hoping the universe will fill in the gaps. But spiritual law doesn't work that way. It's precise. It mirrors back exactly what you put into it. If your words are unclear, your results will be unclear. If your declarations are wishy-washy, your manifestations will be inconsistent. But when you speak with laser-focused intention, I command the gate of divine ideas to release a strategy that generates $10,000 in the next 30 days. Now you've given the universe something specific to work with. Now you've activated a precise pathway, and the spiritual realm knows exactly what to deliver. Precision requires you to get clear on what you actually want, which means doing the internal work of identifying your true desires beneath all the surface-level wishes. Once you have that clarity, your words become weapons of creation, cutting through confusion and calling forth exactly what you need. But words alone aren't enough if they're not backed by expectation. This is the missing piece for so many people. They speak the right declarations, but they don't actually expect anything to happen. They're going through motions, hoping it works, but internally doubting whether it will. That doubt neutralizes the power of the words. Expectation sets the entire tone for how quickly manifestation occurs. When your expectation is low, you're broadcasting a frequency that says, maybe this will happen someday, but probably not. The universe receives that mixed signal and delivers accordingly, slow results, if any. But when your expectation is high, when you genuinely anticipate breakthrough, when you're internally positioned as someone waiting for the inevitable rather than hoping for the unlikely, everything accelerates. Opportunities don't just appear, they rush toward you because you're radiating a frequency that says, "I'm ready, I'm expecting this, bring it now." High expectation also makes you spiritually sensitive. You start noticing things others miss. The conversation that seemed casual suddenly reveals itself as a divine connection. The idea that popped into your head becomes the strategy you needed. The email you almost ignored turns out to be the opportunity you've been praying for. This sensitivity comes from being internally aligned with expectation. You're awake to what's happening around you because you believe something is happening for you. Write in the comments, "I expect my breakthrough now." Acceleration is wasted on the unprepared. Joseph Murphy observed this repeatedly. People would pray for breakthrough, decree abundance, do everything right spiritually, and then when the acceleration actually came, they couldn't handle it. Why? Because they were still operating with the internal capacity of someone surviving on scraps. You cannot step into millionaire status carrying the habits, systems, and mindset of someone living paycheck to paycheck. The container has to expand before the content can fill it. Acceleration doesn't just bring more money, it brings more responsibility, more decisions, more complexity, more opportunities that require immediate action. This means you have to stretch yourself before the stretch comes. You have to develop discipline now, not later when you're overwhelmed by success. You have to create organization in your life now, while things are still manageable, so that when the floodgates open, you're not drowning in chaos. Clarity becomes non-negotiable. You can't afford scattered focus when you're operating at a higher level. And stewardship, the ability to manage what's been entrusted to you with wisdom and excellence, that's what determines whether the wealth you receive stays or slips through your fingers. Prepare yourself internally, and the external expansion will feel like a natural progression rather than a shocking disruption. And now we arrive at the core of everything we've been building toward. Commanding wealth gateways isn't a passive exercise or motivational ritual. It's an act of spiritual warfare. You're engaging with forces that have kept you limited, dismantling structures that blocked your access, and enforcing your divine right to abundance. It's prophetic declaration, speaking into existence what already exists in the realm of potential and pulling it into physical reality through the authority of your voice. And it's divine activation. The moment you stop being a spectator in your own life and become an active participant in your destiny. When you command these gates to open, you're stepping into your full authority. You're no longer asking if you're allowed to prosper. You're declaring that prosperity is your birthright, encoded into your very existence. You're engaging directly with heaven's economy, a system that operates on completely different principles than the world's economy. Heaven's economy doesn't recognize recession, limitation, or scarcity. It only knows abundance, multiplication, and overflow. And when you tap into that system with genuine faith and authoritative command, you bypass every earthly limitation that tried to define your financial ceiling. You're demanding, not requesting, but demanding that everything assigned to your destiny be released without further delay. Every resource that has your name on it, every opportunity that was designed for your purpose, every connection that will catapult you forward, every door that's been held closed by spiritual resistance, all of it must now respond to your voice because you understand who you are and what you carry. Type in the comments, "I activate my divine wealth gates now." If you've made it this far, you're not here by accident. The fact that you stayed through this entire message tells me something about you. You're ready. You're not just casually interested in change. You're hungry for it. And that hunger is exactly what the universe responds to. Look, I create content like this because I believe these principles genuinely transform lives when they're applied consistently. This isn't just theory or feel-good motivation. This is spiritual mechanics that work when you work them. And if this resonated with you, if something shifted inside you while you were watching, then I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more we're going to explore together. Deeper insights, practical applications, real strategies for activating the wealth consciousness we've been talking about. Do me a favor and drop a comment right now saying, "This message was meant for me." I want to know who's truly ready to step into this next level, who's committed to the transformation, not just the idea of it. And if you found value in what we covered today, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this message reach more people who need to hear it, and honestly, it lets me know we're building something meaningful here together. Before you go, there's another video I want you to watch. It builds on everything we just discussed and takes you even deeper into the practical steps of manifestation. Click on it and continue with me over there. Your breakthrough is closer than you think, and I'll see you in the next one.